Double Game Week 24 FPL players to buy ahead of the first double game week of the season. I'll be looking at all of the best Liverpool assets, Everton assets, and a few other single game week players that are right at the top of the menu going into Game Week 24. Right then, so let's get stuck in straight away with talking about Liverpool attackers. Now, Mo Salah isn't on this diagram, of course, because almost every FPL manager has him already. If you don't, I would highly advise bringing him in ahead of this double game week. He will be captained by the majority, not everyone, but by the large majority. His underlying attacking data is the best in the game. He's got the most attacking returns in the game. So unless you're dead set against going for Mo no matter what, I would definitely have him in. After that, though, it gets a lot more interesting when talking about Liverpool attacking options. We've got Diaz and Szoboszlai as the two options in midfield at the moment. Now, until recently, that would have probably also included Diogo Jota, maybe even Curtis Jones as well. However, both of them are injured with unknown return dates at the moment. It looks very unlikely that there'll be options for us going into Game Week 24. So for now, it looks like Diaz and Szoboszlai are the two relatively logical options going into the double game week. Now, Diaz has been getting good minutes, and I don't think there's too much doubt as to what the preferred front three for Liverpool is right now. That is almost certainly a combination of Salah, Diaz, and Gakpo, who I'll mention in just a minute's time. But with Diaz in mind, it takes up a pretty valuable midfield spot. Obviously, he's been classified as a midfielder in FPL. He's kind of playing as a forward in real life. The attacking data's good, but last 4 games, he has gone off the boil a little bit, hasn't got an attacking return in the last 4 in the Premier League at the very least. And these next 2 fixtures, Bournemouth away, Everton away, they're not the easiest defences to break down right now. So unless it was someone with a bit better attacking data or presenting better form, I don't think it's worth ripping apart my side to bring in a Diaz if I've already got, say, an Mbeumo or a Gordon at that kind of price point. I think outside of Salah in midfield, you're realistically looking at those 2 options ahead of Diaz for the long term, with the form that Diaz is currently in. That's not to say he's a terrible pick, and the data's still good, and he could easily return in the next 2 games. He should probably start both of those games as well, by the way, which is obviously always a good thing. But the form just isn't really there at the moment, and because he takes up a valuable midfield spot, I'm just not sure I can back him for the price point right now, personally. But that doesn't mean you can't go there, and he will be a relative differential going into the double game week that a lot of people will be put off of going for just because he hasn't done the points recently. So don't rule him out if you're thinking if it suits your team structure to go there. The same goes for Szoboszlai. Now, the attacking data is actually really good for Szoboszlai, considering he's not really an out-and-out forward or attacker for Liverpool. He's playing in the hole in behind that forward line with Jones out with an undisclosed long-term injury. We don't know how long that is going to be right now. It looks like Szoboszlai's place in the team is relatively safe, and the attacking data is getting better week on week as well. He's got 9 attacking returns, I believe, so far this season, which isn't bad going at all, and he's a bit cheaper than Diaz as well, so he's easier to bring into your side without removing someone like an Mbeumo, a Bruno, or possibly a Gordon as well. So he could be a solution there. However, I have to say, my favoured solution out of all of these is Cody Gakpo. Now, that's not just being a hindsight merchant, although the 16-pointer, 3 attacking returns in Game Week 23 will obviously colour my opinion slightly, but I bought him in before that anyway, so I was very happy to receive 3 attacking returns from him against Ipswich. He did get taken off early, but that looked more than anything else like a rest because the game was tied up. By the way, Szoboszlai also got taken off early, around 67 minutes as well. So both of them should be relatively secure for starting in Game Week 24, at least the first fixture anyway. Gakpo has been presenting very good form recently and better data than anyone else on this graphic right now too. He's also cheaper than Diaz, and he doesn't take up a midfield spot, which again, I will reiterate, is quite precious in our teams at the moment. There are a lot of good options in midfield, slightly less so in attack, and Gakpo maybe fills a slot a little bit more comfortably than a Diaz does in midfield. So Gakpo was my preferred choice. I've already bought him, so maybe there's a little bit of bias going on there, and I don't want to rule out other players just because I can't personally go there. But I do really like Gakpo. A double of Bournemouth away, Everton away possibly isn't the best, but Wolves at home after that is good. And I do still think it's worthwhile going for Liverpool attackers to create yourself the triple up. Obviously, you might also want a defender in there as well, though. So let's have a look at some of the defensive options and whether or not it's worth possibly going for double defence in Liverpool rather than double attack. So on to double defence, and by far the highest pick player right now is Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's no question as to why either. He's got much better attacking underlying data than anyone else in the Liverpool defence. Obviously also gets all the clean sheet points that any of these guys would have as well. But attached to that, he's pretty good on the bonus too. So he's got a number of different routes to points, whereas anyone else on this graphic do have other routes to points, but it's just much less likely that they get those points. Now, Konate obviously got an assist in game week 23, but the data suggests that that will be much more of a rarity than Trent picking up attacking returns, which again, anecdotally, you can probably figure out for yourself. So 0.39 XGI per 90 for Trent is very, very good. He would be expected across the double to maybe pick up an attacking return or two if we're lucky. And it's not the hardest double in terms of clean sheets either. Bournemouth will be a test, especially away from home, and Bournemouth have been absolutely phenomenal recently. Everton aren't exactly potent going forward though, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a clean sheet there. And then after that, Wolves at home isn't going to be too much of a struggle for a clean sheet either. Obviously things can happen, but on paper at least, it looks like a pretty good option for a clean sheet. So outside of Trent, is it worth going for a Liverpool double up in defence? And I don't think it's a bad option whatsoever. It largely depends on your team structure. If you've got a couple of defenders which you're very happy to get rid of, then bringing in someone like a Van Dijk or a Konate might suit your plans pretty well. However, from what I can see going around the community, I think it's more common that there's a forward spot going to maybe complete the Liverpool triple up there. Whereas in defence, I think most of us are fairly happy with two, maybe three of our defenders. That won't be the same for everyone. What I would say, though, is doubling up on the Liverpool defence this week might look pretty good and look good for game week 25 as well. But after that, Man City away and Newcastle at home, I'm probably not expecting a clean sheet there. So unless I'm able to bench one of those defenders pretty comfortably in those 2 game weeks, I'm not going to really be sat that comfortably with a Konate alongside a Trent, or a Van Dijk, more importantly, alongside a Trent, partly for the price, but also partly because there are only so many other defenders that I can rotate in for them, and it might not suit my team structure. So Van Dijk's a bit more expensive, over 1 million more expensive than Konate, and given the fact that the data is actually slightly better for Konate in terms of attacking returns, or expected attacking returns, I think I probably would favour Konate. Now, he's not as reliable as Van Dijk in terms of the expected minutes, mainly due to injury, but as long as he stays fit across the double, you would expect 180 minutes against Bournemouth and Everton combined. So I do think if you're willing to go for a double Liverpool defence, or if you've not got any Liverpool defenders, you're looking to buy one now, and you can't afford Trent for whatever reason, I think Konate would probably be the option I go for right now. Obviously, Van Dijk always carries a threat from set pieces, but so does Konate. Van Dijk has been consistent and reliable on minutes, but as long as he's fit, Konate is pretty much the exact same there as well. The attacking data, there's not really that much in it either. So I think if I was going to go for a double up in defence, it would probably be Trent alongside Konate. But there are those of you out there who have a goalkeeper issue and might be looking at Alisson. Now, the underlying defensive data for Liverpool is very good, and the reason that I bring that up specifically in Alisson's case is that's all you can really rely on for a goalkeeper. You can't rely on attacking output. You have to go off of the defensive data and hope that the clean sheets are consistent enough that he's worth the price. And Alisson is one of the most expensive keepers in the game, so you do have to be slightly careful there. I arguably made a mistake bringing Riot in on my wild card around about game week 6 or 7, I can't remember specifically now, spending that little bit extra money on a keeper that I couldn't use elsewhere, and he's not outperformed the 5s or the 4.5 keepers for a very long stretch of fixtures now, and it's left me with 1 million that is tied up in Raya that I couldn't really spend elsewhere. Now, he's not been a nightmare, but it has been an issue for squad structure. And if you bring in Alisson now, it's not to say that it's going to go terribly. He could easily keep 2 clean sheets across the double game week and then game week 25, 2 out of 3 maybe, Everton and Wolves possibly. But after that, Man City, Newcastle, and then a pretty decent chance. In fact, I think Liverpool would be favourites to blank in game week 29 at the moment if they were to progress in the Carabao Cup past Spurs, who are struggling at the moment. Obviously, only a 1-goal deficit there. If they get to the final, then they will blank in game week 29. And that's much more of a problem for Alisson owners than it is for a Trent owner, or a Konate owner, or a Van Dijk owner, because most of us don't have 2 playing keepers. We've only got 1. And even if you've got Fabianski as your backup keeper, well, he lost his place in game week 23. So there's no guarantee that he'll get it back by game week 29 either. Even if you're expecting to have 2 playing keepers, one of them being Alisson, it might not work out that way. So unless you've got a very specific structure that allows you to bring in Alisson without having to even worry about game week 29, i.e. you've got a Henderson next to him or some other playing keeper, then I would probably look to avoid Alisson personally. But if you can accommodate that, I don't think it's the worst route to go down. So now moving on to Everton assets, there are a couple of pretty appealing options going into the double game week, and I wouldn't be massively put off by the fixtures in the double either. Leicester at home is obviously very good, but a lot of people have been saying that because it's Liverpool at home in the second game, it's almost not a double game week at all, and I would maybe slightly contest that. It's obviously a very difficult double in terms of the second game, but at the very least you get appearance points from them, and it's a free swing. You might be able to get lucky. Obviously attacking returns can happen, heroics can happen, maybe there's a clean sheet there if they're extremely lucky. Very unlikely though. But if you're going for someone like a Jordan Pickford, even if they don't keep a clean sheet, he can still get a few points with the saves that he could make against Liverpool, and you'd expect him to have to make quite a few saves in that game as well. So even though it's not the best double on paper, I think Leicester's obviously the juicy one. And then after that, Liverpool's a bit of a free swing. You'll get appearance points. You might get lucky with something more. And I think with double game weeks in mind, Everton assets, at the very least, do make sense to bring in 1 and maybe 2 of them. So Pickford is first up. An XGC per 90 of 1.36 isn't half bad. It's around mid-table, slightly upper of mid-table, I believe. But he's actually the second top point scoring keeper so far this season. The reason for that isn't just the clean sheets he's kept, which obviously he has kept a fair few, but it's also the amount of save points he's racked up along the way too. So he's a bit of a save machine this season, and he does often get some bonus points attached as well. It's not completely out of the ordinary for him to pick up some bonus points. So bringing in Pickford does seem like a fairly sensible idea going into the double game week. Now, it won't suit everyone because maybe you're pretty happy with your keeper, but I had David Raya, who's been a little bit overpriced so far this season for what he's actually produced. And although I do see a fair few clean sheets coming on the horizon, it's not often that he picks up a 9-pointer like he did against Wolves. He doesn't usually get a ton of save points, and he doesn't usually get bonus attached either. So the upside is usually around 6 points for him at a push. With Pickford, he might not get as many clean sheets, but he also gets the save points and he can get bonus as well. So I think he probably matches Raya after the double game week is out of the way. And of course, he's cheaper. It enables me to move for other options as well that otherwise I couldn't afford with free transfers. And of course, Leicester is not a bad fixture for a clean sheet either. Obviously, Liverpool's much harder, but we've already discussed about the fact that you get the appearance points, you might get save points, you might get lucky. So I do like Pickford. He's at a relatively decent price. And even after the double game week's out of the way, I don't hate the fixtures. Palace and Man United, you wouldn't expect clean sheets necessarily, but you also wouldn't be shocked if Everton pulled something off. Brentford will be tough, but after that, they have a couple of decent fixtures that you're very happy to own Pickford for as well. So Pickford's one option. I think he's probably the strongest double game week option at Everton right now. And of course, he won't be blanking in game week 29 either. So that's one benefit that he has over someone like an Alisson, who we've already discussed. There is the potential for the blank in game week 29 if the Carabao Cup results go a very specific way. So Pickford for me is already in. I've already bought him for David Raya. It's freed up a bit of money, and I'm pretty happy with that move. It seems sensible to me at the very least. After that, we're looking at Mykolenko as the alternative defender. You could double up and you could go Pickford and Mykolenko. I'm a little bit hesitant. I am considering it because I can get there for one extra free transfer from Greaves. So someone who sat last on my bench week on week can become Mykolenko, and he is a good starter to have this game week in particular. But then I need to ask myself, is it worth spending an extra 0.5 of my budget, which is precious at the moment, on a player that I'm planning on probably benching most game weeks after the double game week is out of the way? And that's something that I'm weighing up at the moment. It might be the case in your side that you're happy to play him more often than not. Crystal Palace isn't bad. Man United, you might get lucky. After Brentford, there's a couple of good fixtures as well. So he might be startable in your side. But I've got Hall, Robinson, Trent and Gabriel. And I don't think he's forcing himself past many of those players in many of the following game weeks after game week 24. So it's whether or not it's worth an extra free transfer for me and spending 0.5 of my budget that I could use on upgrades elsewhere. So for me, he's questionable. He might be someone that I look at bringing in and doubling up on Everton. But as it stands right now, I think he's far from essential. I think if you have one Everton defender, that's going to cover you off well enough in the double. If you really back them to keep at least one clean sheet, doubling up on the defence is not a bad option. And I think if there was a second favourite after Pickford for me right now, it probably would just about be Mykolenko. Now that brings me on to the forwards at Everton. Now sadly, DCL was pulled up with a hamstring injury. It looks relatively long term. I don't think he's going to be an option in game week 24, sadly. But that leaves us with Ndiaye or possibly Beto. Now I'll talk about Beto in a minute. I'll start off with Ndiaye, who has been relatively popular this week. The problem for me is the attacking data is just simply pretty awful. 0.21 XGI per 90 is really quite poor for a striker. And although he'll be on penalties with DCL off the pitch, it's still not looking that convincing to me. You might get lucky with Leicester. Who knows? You might get a couple of attacking returns across the double. But I can't honestly sit here and say that I will enjoy owning him after that double game week is out of the way. You might be really strongly feeling that he's going to do well in double game week 24 itself. But after that, unless you're very happy with him sat on your bench for a number of game weeks, or you've got a route to get rid of him straight away, for me, I'm not sure it's worth the free transfer. And there are other players around his price point that I can get to that even though they don't have a double game week, I'm pretty happy to go there instead. There is also the potential that Ndiaye himself has an injury too. He signalled to the bench around about the 75th minute in game week 23 that he needed to come off. And then he was obviously brought off straight after that as well. So even though he's not flagged in FPL, I'm a little bit worried that a lot of managers are bringing him in thinking that he's the DCL replacement and that he will get penalties, he will be good on minutes, but he himself might be an injury doubt. So just one to look out for. If you are going for Ndiaye, maybe just wait for a press conference before clicking those buttons and locking it in, because the last thing I'd want is for you to bring in a player that is an alternative to an injured player who is himself injured. Now, the other interesting option as a mega differential would probably be Beto. Now, don't be fooled by his underlying attacking data. 0.50 is good, but it's on such limited minutes that one or two big chances in those limited minutes would kind of throw it all out of whack. So don't pay too much attention to that. But he is a cheap striker option that will probably get good minutes now DCL is out for a little while. So if you were really fighting against the current, if you wanted to be Maverick, then Beto should get good minutes. I can't really tell you for sure that he's going to be a massively good upside pick across this double, or you'll want him after the double game week. But if you're looking or tempted by Ndiaye and you're worried about the injury, then Beto might be a decent alternative to get that maximum Everton exposure, an attacking option as well, and someone who should get good minutes with his competitor in that position out for medium to long term as well. So as an ultra differential, I don't think Beto's the worst shout, but if I was ranking Everton options, I'd start off with Pickford, Mykolenko probably after that, And then we're looking at players like Beto and Dai, maybe Decore as an outside shout, but I think it's fairly slim pickings, and I probably wouldn't go for a full Everton triple up unless you were going full tilt and really going ultra aggressive on this week. Right then, so I promised some single game week players alongside the double game week ones, and Bournemouth have to be spoken about because they're in fantastic form at the moment. They've just beaten Newcastle and Nottingham Forest, two of the best defences and the form sides in the league right now. And in those two games, they scored 9 goals. So their forwards are going to be right at the top of the billing for a lot of FPL managers. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that they are good options going forward. It's whether or not they're good options to be buying this game week. And with Liverpool at home, although Bournemouth have been brilliant against tougher opposition all season long, especially down at the Vitality at home, they've taken points off of some of the best teams in the league already. Liverpool are on a title tilt. It will be their sternest test yet. And I think you have to play the odds a little bit. There are other good options in midfield this game week, some of them around the same price point that you might already own, like an Amad Diallo, like a Morgan Rogers, who may not have been in the best form in the last couple of game weeks, but they've still got decent fixtures going into game week 24. Is it worth a transfer to get rid of them, to bring in a Bournemouth player before they hit their good run of fixtures? Possibly, because they could score against Liverpool. They've obviously done so against some really tough defences in the last couple of game weeks. But for me, I do like to play the odds a little bit. I've already got Semenyo. I do plan on benching him ahead of game week 24 because I'm happy enough with my front 7 anyway. But I'm more than willing to accept that Bournemouth options could get attacking returns this week. And if you've got a few spare transfers and you're bullish on Bournemouth enough to say, I don't care about the fixture this game week, I'm willing to bring them in this week, a week before others might jump on them, and take that opportunity now, knowing that they've got the good fixture run afterwards, then I would have no problem with that whatsoever. For me, I'd prefer to wait a week. I will bench Semenyo this week. If I didn't have Semenyo, I think I might very slightly favour Kluivert. Obviously, it's been a bit noisy recently in terms of the attacking returns. He's hauled twice in 2 game weeks, and I don't want to get carried away and think that he is the next coming of Messi, but he has been playing very, very well, and I wouldn't be surprised to see those kind of attacking returns continue at a relatively decent cadence. Now, that's not to say that he's going to be getting 2 or 3 attacking returns a week, but he's a sub 6 million midfielder on penalties and getting 80 plus minutes a game week as well at the moment. So I do really like him as an option, and I think I would slightly favour him ahead of Semenyo, given his form and given the fact he has penalties and better data as well. Don't be massively surprised if players like Kluivert and Altara do get reduced minutes in the next few game weeks, though, when Bournemouth gets some players back from injury. But in both cases, I'd still be fairly confident in going for them now, knowing that they're both in good form. And honestly, I don't really see Bournemouth changing their starting 11 too much, considering the form they're in right now. I think you'd have to see Kluivert or Altara play pretty poorly a couple of game weeks in a row for them to come out of the side. And although they might get slightly earlier substitutions at their individual price points, I still think they're great value for money. If I was ranking those 3 options right now, in terms of the attacking options at Bournemouth, I think I'd very marginally pick Kluivert first, Semenyo slightly second, slightly worse data, great shot volume though, obviously being in great form himself too, but much more secure on the minutes, even when injured players come back in. And then after that, Altara might come in third. Now, he's got great underlying attacking data. He's the cheapest of the bunch, and I do like him as an option. But I think out of these 3, he's the most likely to get early substitutions or maybe come out of the starting lineup over time if we see some of those players come back soon. So that would be my ranking. I like all 3. And don't get me wrong, Altara is still a good option. I think if I was picking fresh right now, I'd slightly go for Kluivert, but I'm very happy with Semenyo, and it's definitely not a transfer I want to make to go from Kluivert to Semenyo. In terms of Kerkez, he's also on this graphic. Really like him as a defensive option, but probably not this game week ahead of Liverpool at home. After this week against Southampton, and then it's a great run after that as well. He's got good underlying attacking data, and he looks like a great value pickup from game week 25 onwards. So another team that I'm really interested in targeting over the next run of fixtures is Brentford. And although I've got this as a comparison graphic, there are plenty of universes in which I don't really see it as an either or. I see it as a why not get both? And Mbeumo and Wissa both have great underlying attacking data, have both been in great nick in terms of actual output this season, and they formed a pretty formidable partnership up top for Brentford at times. Now, obviously, at certain moments, they do play a 3-4-3 where Wissa's through the middle and Mbeumo's slightly further out on the right wing, but that's counteracted by the fact that Mbeumo does also have penalties and is more regularly a 90-minute man. Now, Wissa's underlying attacking data is much better in terms of the XG per 90, and Wissa is a player that I'm very keen on bringing in this game week. If you've seen my transfer plans video, I'm almost certain to be buying him for João Pedro, whose underlying attacking data is nowhere near as good as Wissa's, even though he's got penalties and he's regularly a 90-minute man himself. Wissa, 10 goals this season already, 0.59 XG per 90 is phenomenal. At 6.3 million, considering his very high expected minutes and these fixtures to come, feels like a bit of a no-brainer for me. And if you've got the money, I think I would go as far as saying that he's a better purchase even this week ahead of someone like an Ndiaye or a Beto if you were going to go for an Everton attacker. I prefer Wissa if you've got the money to do so, because I think he's a much better long-term hold. The Tottenham fixture is a great fixture itself as well, and I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever if he outscored the Everton attackers even in Double Gameweek 24 itself with that one fixture. So Wissa, for me, makes a lot of sense. It might not suit every team structure, but he's a player I'm very interested in bringing in. The data's great, and the attacking output is also very solid as well at his price point. But he's not necessarily the only Brentford player I'd want to be bringing in. I could also be looking at Bryan Mbeumo, who I sold a few weeks ago as a very short-term sale. I always planned on bringing him back in either in Game Week 24 or Game Week 25, depending on how my team shaped up. And this game week, I've got the option of maybe bringing in both Mbeumo and Wissa for the likes of João Pedro, I've already mentioned, but also Anthony Gordon, who doesn't have the best set of fixtures over the next 4 or 5. Fulham at home's not a bad one, but he's not on penalties. The underlying attacking data matches Mbeumo, but Mbeumo has a better set of fixtures over the next run. And of course, Mbeumo's minutes are very solid. He's got penalties, all of that good stuff. So I am tempted to make that move as well. I think I can probably get away with just Wissa, and I think if you're watching this video thinking which Brentford asset should I go for, there's not really a lot in my mind to choose between the two. The underlying expected points over the next 5 game weeks via Fantasy Football Hub suggests they're almost neck and neck, which is a pretty good indicator of what we might expect from them, although shouldn't be taken as gospel, of course. But they should be there or thereabouts over the next few game weeks. I think both are great options, and it largely depends on which players in your own team right now are you least happy with, and which are the easiest players to be bringing in for your team structure. So for me, Wissa is an easier player to be bringing in. I've got the money. I've got a spot in my forward line that I'm not happy with, that I can easily upgrade to Wissa and be very happy with very quickly with one free transfer. With Mbeumo, it's a little bit more marginal. Now, you might be sat there with a midfielder like a Bruno that you're just not happy with right now. You want to be selling, possibly an Ødegaard as well, someone around that price point. And you can very easily get to Mbeumo instead. And that would make more sense for your team. Whereas for me, I'm not that upset with owning Gordon ahead of Game Week 24, even though it's Fulham at home. They've not been in excellent form recently themselves, Fulham, and obviously Newcastle have been brilliant. So is it required that I sell Gordon for Mbeumo this game week? Probably not, but I do see it as potentially decent upside, not just for this week, but also for the next stretch. And I do really like that matchup against Spurs. So in summary, I would honestly advise that both are very good transfers in this game week. Depending on your team structure, I'd be prioritizing the one that is the easiest to get to, but I don't think there's much between the two of them, and I'm very happy to say that Wissa can probably take on Mbeumo if you really wanted. Overall, though, I think I kind of want both, and if I can find a way of squeezing them both in over the next couple of game weeks, I will be very likely to do so. Now, as we reach the end of today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the show, of course, and if you've got any questions of your own going into Game Week 24, do leave them in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to you all before we hit the Game Week 24 deadline.